Blessed Angelina was born in the castle of Monte Giove, near Orvieto, Italy, in the year 1377. Her father, Count James Angioballi, was the head of a noble and powerful family with large territorial possessions. Her mother was Anne, the daughter of the Count of Corbara. Under the guidance of her truly pious mother, Angelina from her very infancy became accustomed to the practice of prayer. The names of Jesus and Mary were her first words, and they continued to be for her a source of consolation and strength during her whole life. It was her delight to erect and decorate little altars and to pray and sing hymns before them with her sister and playmates. As she grew older, she persuaded the young girls of the neighborhood to attend these devotions, and thus she prepared herself for the apostolate she was one day to exercise, for the maidens began to look upon her as one who was more than a playmate, and later united their destinies to hers for life. At the age of 12, Angelina lost her mother by death. This affliction made a deep impression on her character, manifesting to her the uncertainty of life and the insufficiency of human aid and consolation. She now determined to renounce the honors and pleasures of the world and to give herself up entirely to the service of God. Following an inspiration of divine grace, she, at this time, dedicated herself to God and His Blessed Mother by a vow of virginity. Henceforth all her aspirations were directed to the service of her heavenly bridegroom. With a fervor unusual in one of her age, she strove to die to self and the world and devoted herself to prayer, penance, and works of charity. When Angelina had attained the age of 15, her father proposed to give her in marriage to John of Terni, Count of Civitella, but she, mindful of her vow, firmly refused her father's proposal. The latter flew into a passion, vehemently upbraided her, and finally gave her 8 days to consider the matter, declaring that he would kill her, if she persisted in her refusal. Full of anguish, the pious maiden redoubled her prayers, and besought our Lord to help her overcome the obstacles which were thrown in the way of her resolution to belong to Him alone. She also placed herself under the protection of the Blessed Virgin, Saint Joseph, and Saint John the Apostle. Her earnest pleadings were heard. While praying with great devotion, she heard a voice from heaven, which said to her, "Fear not, my daughter, yield obedience to your father, and leave the rest to me." She accordingly notified her father of her readiness to do as he wished. The Count rejoiced at his daughter's submission to his desire, and the marriage ceremonies were celebrated with great pomp. During the festivities which followed, Angelina found an opportunity to retire to her chamber. Bursting into tears, she cast herself before a little altar and implored our Lord to come to her assistance according to His promise. In the midst of her distress, an angel appeared to her, consoled her, and reassured her of the divine protection. The Count of Civitella, her husband, coming at that moment, inquired who the mysterious person was whom he had seen conversing with her, and who had vanished so suddenly. Angelina told him of her vow, of the voice which had told her to do her father's will and leave the rest to Providence, and then entreated him to allow her to keep the promise she had made to God. The young Count, admiring the heroic virtue of his bride, and touched by grace, not only granted her desire, but also bound himself by the vow of perpetual chastity. The pious couple took up their abode in the castle of Civitella and vied with each other in the practice of prayer and works of mercy. But the health of the young Count soon began to decline, and after 2 years he died the death of the just. Angelina was thus left free to carry out her long-cherished intention of devoting herself exclusively to the service of God. In order to make her resolution evident to all, she joined the Third Order of St. Francis, and easily induced her ladies of honor and her domestics to do the same. Together with these she strictly observed the rule of the older in all things, imitated the life of a religious community as far as possible, and attended to the wants of the sick and the poor. But even this did not satisfy the zeal of Angelina. Accompanied by some of her companions, she visited the towns of the district, and by her earnest exhortations and holy life succeeded in converting many sinners and in arousing in all a love of virtue. A number of young women, some of them belonging to the highest families, touched by her words and example, consecrated themselves to God either by joining her little society or by entering convents. This brought upon her a violent storm of persecution. The friends and relatives of many of the maidens who had been guided by her counsel, accused her of causing discord in families, of looking on marriage as wrong, of witchcraft, and even of heresy. Ladislas, the king of Naples, to whom these accusations were brought, allowed himself to be deceived and believed them. He summoned Angelina to his court, determined to have her burnt as a sorceress. But God watched over his servant. He revealed to her the evil design of the king, and bade her obey the summons without fear and to take with her, in the folds of her mantle, some live coals which she was to present to him. On the appointed day, Angelina appeared before the court. She declared herself innocent of the charges brought against her, and concluded by saying, "If, sire, I am guilty of the crime that has been laid to my charge, I am ready to suffer the punishment due to it." And then, opening the fold of her mantle and displaying the live coals, she added, "Behold the fire, let the pile be lighted." Full of astonishment at the evident intervention of God in behalf of his faithful servant, the king acknowledged her innocence and courteously dismissed her. A few days later, Angelina, by her prayers, restored to life the son of a nobleman. To escape the veneration shown her on all sides, she, with her companions, returned to Civitella. Here she continued her former mode of life, until a new persecution broke out against her and she was banished from the kingdom. Humbly submitting to the will of God, she sold all her possessions, and went to Assisi. While at prayer in the Church of St. Mary of the Angels, she was wrapped in ecstasy and received the divine command to proceed to Foligno and to found there a convent in which she and her companions were to live under the rule of the Third Order of St. Francis. Arriving at Foligno, the servant of God presented herself before the bishop of the city and humbly begged his permission to found a convent of regular tertiaries. The bishop, recognizing Angelina's great virtue, received her petition favorably, and after obtaining from Pope Boniface IX the necessary authorization, assisted her in every way to accomplish her purpose. When the convent was completed, she and her companions, who had increased to 12, entered upon their novitiate, and after a year pronounced the solemn vows of poverty, obedience, and chastity. This was the first community of regular tertiaries with vows in Italy. Angelina, who was then only 20 years of age, was chosen superior. She governed her sisters with enlightened prudence, and edified them by her fervor in prayer, by humility, mortification, and charity. The fame of her holy life and that of her spiritual daughters attracted many pious souls, and in the course of time, she founded 16 convents throughout Italy. In 1428, she was appointed Superior General of all the convents founded by her, which office she held until the time of her death. When she felt her last hour approach, she made a general confession and received the last sacraments with great fervor. She then took affectionate leave of her spiritual daughters, and after enjoying the delights of an ecstasy, she entered into the joys of heaven. This took place on July 14, 1435. She was buried in the Franciscan church at Foligno. Pope Leo XII approved the veneration paid to her from time immemorial.